I bid you good day. I place you within my own being as we consider a new subject, a new topic, one that will touch you deeply. For indeed you are deep and profound individuals. Any subject that is well to be considered must be taken into the heart, and yet it is the mind that is the first to gather information. It is the brain and mind that is the first to gather round and say there is something new to be learned. One does not often think of the heart as the most learning vessel. But I will tell you that it is the heart that puts into practice what the mind brings home. And home is heart and hearth. With this in mind, in mindfulness, we explore the subject lightly but broadly of depression as it is known in your time today. It is not a name that I would offer to it, but it is the name, the condition by which it is called by many. And far too many, in fact, consider themselves in depression, far more than at other times in history's model of humanity. And we will touch upon this as well. But to be fair, we will call the subject depression, mindfulness, and healing, for the three go hand in hand and cannot truly be separate from one another. It is simply that the first, depression, does not often yield lightly to mindfulness or to healing. It adheres to the principles, to the diagnoses of its own idea. Let us begin then by considering depression. Again, your word, not Gaia's. This must be clear. Depression, as it is understood today, is an inability of the polarity of mind-body lifetime's awareness to touch upon all of its aspects, to know itself completely or intimately, to reach into its full attire, if you like, its full garment of light. So what you may term bipolarity, in essence, is essentially true, but not quite as it is understood. Those that in some way are depressed are unable to reach the full potential of what polarity offers. Now, assume that at one end of the polarity scale is light and at the other dark. Or at one end is illness and at the other end is wellness. Well, at one end then, as we continue this metaphor, one pole would be the field of all possibilities. The other pole would be the field of all impossibilities. In some ways, both of these are the same if understood correctly, if one were to delve into that subject. But perhaps we will consider that upon another day, as we often say in these talks. Therefore, one who is depressed in their own way cannot fully access the field of all possibilities or the field of all impossibilities. That is to say that for someone that considers themselves in a state or a condition of depression, all of the things that may be possible to others do not seem possible to them. Likewise, in the way that one may dream and daydream and consider all of the impossibilities that would be wonderful to consider, for those that find themselves in this state or condition, those things are also not completely impossible. So the dreams and the daydreams of what can be and become, that is not open, it is not accessible. So that is to say that someone with a state or a condition of depression does not have full access or full mobility of all that is brain or all that is mind or all that is heart. For the heart, as we have said, implements all of the new, beautiful possibilities and impossibilities. After all, is it not the heart that is free to consider all of this? Well, if the heart is in fact not free to consider it, then the heart is not free at all. then such an individual would have or consider themselves to have less free will than someone else. The same individual then would not have the same mobility, would not see themselves as having all of accessibility to all that life has to offer. They begin to see themselves as less limited, more in a box. What they are then able to do or accomplish in a day in the field of possibilities of one day becomes a little bit less, a little bit more difficult for them. And to consider that all those impossible things that in their own way are possible, well, that too would be a little bit of a far stretch. So depression then is the inability to reach the full scale of all that is possible and impossible in a human life. It would be not to hear or participate in all of the musical notes, to understand the depth of the music and the composition. It is not to see life as being complete or able to complete itself without a great deal of effort or work or struggle. So for these individuals, everything that appears to be normal to someone else appears to them to be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more stress and strain, and because they cannot fathom possibilities and impossibilities, well, at the same time, it seems hardly worth it. Because even if you were to stress and strain and struggle out of the free will, out of the darkness or density of the moment, how far could you get after all, would say that mind to that person. Now, depression, true depression, can be divided into many different categories, and our time together will not allow us the full possibilities to understand it in its depth, in its origin. But it is well to say then that it is in fact a condition, and that it is in fact a temporary condition. There is no permanence to this. But humanity at large does not understand this yet, because in order to understand, it would need to understand brain, mind, mindfulness, the brain-mind connection, and the heart connection as that, as well as the field of impossibilities or invisibilities. And to science that avidly studies this, well, that which is invisible is difficult to comprehend, as difficult as not being depressed is to someone that is depressed. And yet these individuals depend now for science to develop something else that will free it from captivity. So those individuals that are depressed consider themselves to be captive to this, whether they consider it a state or a condition, a discomfort, an illness, or a dis-ease. They consider themselves enslaved to the process. And then there are a variety of ways in which they free themselves from it temporarily, either by the use of certain pharmaceutical components, solutions, or by what else can be implemented on a temporary scale, but often returning to these difficult moments throughout their lives. Depression, then, long and long ago, perhaps it would delight you to know that it was a condition that was well deserved or well earned by those that were in the arts. For instance, musical composers were thought to be depressed, and it was a compliment as it was put to them. The same could be said of artists or writers or philosophers, those who would gaze at the stars, or those who in some way contemplated life apart from the norm of others. They were considered to be depressed or apart from normal society. And it was not a condemnation as it is put forth today. It was not a criticism as it is thought of today. It was not quite a compliment, but it is by way of saying, oh look, they are in their left brain or their right brain. They are more artful or more this or more that. Consciously creative or unconsciously receptive, or what it would be. It was an understanding. It was a namesake. In the same way that one would add prestige if one adds doctor to a title, well, to add, well, they are a little bit depressed, you know, was just a little bit of a compliment or an understanding. Of course, that was some time ago. And now those who consider themselves under this category lament that instead they are segregated, that there is prejudice against them. Well, after all, that is partly the human way as well, for humanity knows prejudice with this or against that. I am for this and against the other. I believe in this, but I do not believe in the other. So you see, humanity is highly polarized at this time, and it gathers, it clumps together into certain categories as well. So it is important for those that consider themselves depressed, if you must, do your best not to lump yourself into a certain category, if you can, if you like. For there are, in fact, those that become depressed based on a certain nutritious or lack of nutritious due to their diet, so a food depression. There is, in fact, a spiritual depression of those who, for one reason or another, and there are many of these, have returned to earth too soon or too late in their own way. They have mistimed their adventure, or so they think on an unconscious level. Of course, this can be regained. It can be retaken, a little bit like a stitch in sewing or knitting. It can be picked up again. But one must know how to retrace the steps in order to find that one moment, as it were, a moment out of time to bring it into time. Depression, as it is known today, is temporary, I will tell you that, when properly addressed, when properly understood. And there is not a specific logical reason why one must be depressed for an entire life, though there are some that would find it in some way easier or more comfort to live in a world. It is more insular, it is more conditioned, but in its own way it appears to be more safe and secure than the outer world, which is so unpredictable. For that is the course of life itself. Life is very, as you well know, unpredictable. Here today and gone tomorrow, just as a thought is, just as a life is. And this is very difficult for those that consider themselves depressed, that life is in fact fleeting, that it is in fact meaningless. Yes, life is meaningless. It is meaningless until you give it meaning. It is meaningful because you give it meaning. Life of its own. And you have heard this of Gaia before. Life is meaningless but the meaning that you give it. Life is purposeless but the purpose that you give it. And yet, as with many things, purpose is something that is little understood. Purpose is that which you are. It is not what you do. And yet depression is something that you do. It is not what you are. So someone is then always temporarily depressed or temporarily disabled, just as a mood. You are not always in a bad mood or a good mood. They are variable. The weather is variable. The seasons are variable. They come and go, not simply as they please. There is in fact a divine timing, a coordinated effort, a divine plan, even to when the seasons arrive, just as the phases of the moon can be planned upon. And so it is the same with depression. There are conditions that surround the idea of depression and how one goes about it. So to be perfectly plain and clear then, depression as you understand it today, it is a temporary condition. It is a misalignment of the polarity of the beingness that you are, where you are not as able to stretch beyond a certain level. So you cannot hit the higher notes, as it would be, or the deeper places. You cannot hear or access as much of the invisible beauties that are restorative to life, restorative to the functions that are mundane and physical. And so you become caught in that, caught in the net of the mundane and the physical, unable to see the profound beauties that extend far beyond this. Caught a little bit like a fish in a net, a beautiful fish, if you like, swimming in a beautiful pond. But it is a pond after all, it is not the ocean. So it is a little bit a feeling of being trapped. Some of those that consider themselves depressed now also consider themselves in some way cast out or cast away from families or from friends or from heaven itself, as if God had said, go back to the earth and do it again. You didn't get it quite right last time. And to some degree, though again, you will take these words correctly, it is true. A large majority of those who consider themselves depressed have returned to the earth in what they believe in some way is unfair or unjust. Again, as if there were a misalignment between brain and mind and heart and purpose, as someone did not truly take them seriously or at their word, as if some injustice has made this condition viable for them. That thought, that feeling that some injustice is in some way at play, that something is indeed unfair in how it comes about, prevents some of those with this condition from finding the clarity to escape this thought and the enslavement of mind and body to a spirit that is not enslaved at all. Again, the misalignment to find the divinity or the freedom to explore in greater ways. Depression, then, is not a disease of the mind, for the mind is always free in its own way. It is at least free to explore. It is free to consider, and it is free to consider the impossible. But depression does not allow the complete consideration of the impossible, remember. The scale is not large enough, so it does not allow one the full range or the full mobility to consider all the ways in which it can escape its predicament. So it feels a little bit like a fish in a pond. It is not caught, it is free to move about, but only within less parameters than what others are given, or less opportunities to be or do or create than others. While it is not entirely the case, again, those who are depressed have returned to the earth now and at this time for very particular and sympathetic motives, which is to cleanse, a ritualistic cleansing of all that has been, all that has gone before, of other lifetimes, of other beliefs, of other structures, of other comings and goings and doings. In a sense, it is one life that one can reset the clock, to balance the poles again, to increase the flow of energy from the meridians. And though it may be indeed painful and difficult, here I tell you that there is in fact no better place in the entire universe to do this than the earth. Imagine that. Imagine for a moment that you do have a certain dis-ease that would be terminal elsewhere, but someone says to you, but I have heard that if you will go to the earth, you may endure some difficult and painful moments, and they will seem to last an eternity and a lifetime. But as that is complete, it is a special place, and you will find that you are cleansed, wiping the slate clean as it would be. That is the place to go. That is the place to heal all things, all thoughts, all complications, all past motives. And so the earth is, in fact, a clinic of sorts that allows all of this to take place and more. So that without exception, regardless of your condition, depression being terminal or temporary, as you would think of it, as you would consider it, so it is the place and the time. Again, that is not to say that if you can simply endure it for one whole lifetime, then it will get better. But that is an older belief as well, that says afterlife, or the afterlife is when your reward comes. And no, the earth is not about giving diplomas or rewards for time well spent. You are not incarcerated here, hoping that someday there will be a reprieve and your sentence will be commuted. So it is not that. Depression, then, is that which allows you to consider the thoughts, the beliefs, the limitations, the impoverished feelings, and all that is either right, wrong, but in its own way limited, as has been known in other lifetimes. All lifetimes? No, not necessarily. But those that have made hardened, calcified thoughts and beliefs. For these adhere to you, you know. And after a time they make something akin to a brick wall, concrete built about you, density built about you, until even the most beautiful individual finds it difficult to move into other states of awareness, higher states of consciousness, lesser or more beautiful conditions of density. So the earth, in essence, is a way to cure as well a spiritual depression, or a feeling that one is not heavenly enough, not angelic enough, not good enough, not blessed enough, not forgiven enough. So a depressed individual believes in some way that it is retribution, that it is a karmic life, and that at some point it will awaken from it, or be released from it, or be relieved from it. And to that end, it will either suffer in silence, in quietude, carrying its condition as best as possible, its allotted condition, and hoping that one day it will be as others. But it never does quite see others in the same way, always putting others upon a pedestal. If I could only be like that or like them, or without this, then life would be better. After a time, then, it seems that one is, in fact, less and not more, or not as others. So we must understand all of these aspects of depression. This is what it is, a state and a condition of misalignment of body, mind, soul's awareness, a forgetting that purpose and that which is purposeful is both natural and belonging to the moment, that it is not what one does, but what one is, the isness of life that matter forms about. And without this knowledge, all matter becomes a little bit more dense, as if in fact there is a little bit more of a fog surrounding the mind or clouding the heart. And this fog, dense as it is, prevents the individual from making a creative decision. It is always in search of the right decision, or the way out, or the way through. It does not often consider the most creative or the most bright or the lightest decision, for in some way it considers itself either incapable of achieving this or undeserving, without merit of having such a light. So even when it is accorded a great and simple gift, it is either left at the side or put aside until some point in which it believes that it deserves such a gift, and then it will take it up. At this time I will tell you, however, that those individuals who do or are depressed are in fact vastly creative, with vast abilities just tucked underneath them, just where they can't see them. Indeed, with the ability to see high and beyond what others can see, with the ability to take thoughts and ideas to deep and profound depths. For understand that although the polarity of possible and impossible is not as broad or as stretched as that of others, the ability to see high above a moment, or deeply beneath it into the most profound places, that is a gift of those that in their own way are depressed. To be depressed is to be in a condition It is not to be depraved. And it is not that one has been declined from participating in life in one way or another. So it is well to understand the condition itself. Now, much and more could be said of this condition. In every possible way we could explore it. We could explore it from medical rights, exploring all of the brain and all of the chemical structure of the brain and what the brain might be lacking. How to command then better the dopamine, how to better command and to transfer serotonin from here to there. And all of the other chemical structures could easily as well be adjusted, and they can, or transfer. The rights and privileges and the working essence could be transferred from one part of the brain to another, and you will see that there will come a time in which science will do this literally. In other words, imagine that responsibility for one area of the brain could be transferred to another that is more capable of processing information. Imagine that your left brain is more information prone than your right brain. Certainly more would be expected of that individual or that brain. Well, the brain is a little understood thing, and so responsibility can in fact be transferred more from one area to the brain than another, chemically, structurally, with certain instructions, as easily as hypnotism could accomplish this. But this must be studied a bit more, and of course science must come to trust these modalities, and currently it does not. It would not be able to prove it. The brain is a rather unique and individual thing, and no two are truly alike, and the function of one is not the same as the function of another. And this is highly dependent upon how mindful one is of one's own brain and brain functions, and how well one understands the functions of the rest of the body in order to be in command of the body. You see, ask yourself now, are you in command of your thoughts? Can you predict what thought you will have next, or how long you will dwell on a certain thought? Or what if you have a problem that is not solved yet? Can you predict how often, how many times you will think of that particular thought, that problem, until you arrive at a solution for it? This is different for each particular brain and to the mind that will then implement that solution as well. For some it must test many different theories. For some the solution must be corroborated by others in the outer world. For some it must wait until certain other conditions are played out before the higher probabilities of the solution actually working out presents itself. So there must be other clues. So you see, each brain-mind function has its own uniqueness. And yet if brain-mind were understood more properly, depression would also be better understood, and a cure, if you will call it that, could also be more prominent. Now, the cure for one is not the same as the cure for another, as you well know, just as a certain dosage of a pharmaceutical may be more or less appropriate in one individual than another. So here we are only examining this subject from a very broad perspective, but as profoundly as possible, allowing you conjecture on your part, and allowing you doors and windows to open, to escape from, or to draw a breath of fresh air to. And so in all of these ways, we continue. In order to more fully understand depression, then, we must understand mindfulness and what it is, for they are indeed tied together and cannot truly be separate. Mindfulness, then, is the ability to not command or control the mind, but to be in generation with it. To be in tune with the mind is to be mindful. To be aware of the mind and its compatibility in life is to be mindful. To know how to quiet the mind or how to stimulate the mind is to be mindful. To be creatively engaged in life is mindful. to be at peace regarding both problems and solutions is mindful. To be cooperative and collaborative with others is mindful. To be forgiving and less in the criticism of others is to be mindful. To be loving of conditions within unconditions is mindful. To choose health and well-being over illness, dis-ease, or discomfort is mindful. To be purposefully interested and active in life is mindful. To understand the beauty that takes place during sleep or during dream is mindful. And to be engaged and active in life regardless of what life demonstrates is mindful. Mindfulness here is given to you not as a definition but in examples, each one perfect in its own way. Mindfulness, then, is the ability of the being that you are to generate and regenerate itself, to be stimulating of all that is necessary, proper, pure, and in its own way healing. Mindfulness, then, is the ability of the invisible but necessary and intelligent beingness that you are to take command of the life simply because it is the wisest part of you. So to be mindful does not mean that you are in control all of the time. It simply means that you are aware of the control centers of the being, shifting from one to the other as easily as you would shift your weight from your left foot to your right or your left brain to your right brain. Mindfulness, then, is the ability to use all of the resources that are available to you, whether they are visible or invisible, highly thought of, large or small. Mindfulness is the ability to stretch further, farther, higher, deeper and more profound into the beingness that you are, the visible and the invisible becoming one. So mindfulness is the merging of all hemispheres, all beliefs. It is the dissolving of prejudice. It is the bringing forward of information, allowing it on its own merits to become both knowledge and then wisdom. Mindfulness, then, is that which bridges all gaps between body, mind, and spirit, allowing them to act or be as one without exception. That is a very tall order, you might say. Based upon all of these examples, who among us is mindful? Well, I would say to you that almost every being is mindful to some degree. Mindful at least of what it is to be mindful. There are some who are only mindful in their dream state but cannot yet accomplish this in the waking state. There are some that are very aware in every waking moment of how important it is to be mindful. Oh, but their dreams are reckless and different and strange. And so be it. Mindfulness, then, is unique and different for each being. Mindfulness is one of the ways that the mind can regenerate or restart the engine that is the brain, to retune it, to recalibrate it to what is most needed and what would be of highest benefit now. Therefore, in its own way, mindfulness is not the cure to depression, but it is the way through it. You see, depression is not exactly something that you cure. It is a state of mind, or a state in which the mind only thinks of itself as that. Remember, the mind is not free to consider all possibilities or even the impossibilities, so it is somewhat enslaved to a certain way of thinking or being, a field of gravity that it cannot quite escape. Mindfulness is not the cure to depression, but it is the flashlight that says, look, this way out, or this way through. To be mindful then is to cause the brain to flow into the extremities a little bit more than it does now. Those who are depressed say, I cannot do that much today. It requires too much effort, too much thought. I tried, I couldn't. Perhaps tomorrow, and then perhaps tomorrow. Therefore, mindfulness is the ability to stretch into the smaller and a little bit more difficult corners that will allow one more possibility and one more impossibility of life, perhaps. And with all of these considerations, then, come the next possibilities. The possibilities by which one can become a little bit more generating of brain than regenerating the mind. Mindfulness, then, is sequential, or it has the ability to re-sequence the brain. Imagine for a moment, then, that the brain can be restarted. Imagine that you are able to retrace many of the steps or many of the paths that you have taken in life, not because they are wrong, but because simply there is a more direct path that you could take now that you did not know about then. So it is not a matter of correcting mistakes. It is simply a matter of soon finding yourself in a place where you said, oh, I remember now. This is the quicker path. That is the more direct path. Or here is a more accelerated path. I have forgotten about it all this time, and now I remember. This would be healing, a very quick healing. So this form of mindfulness, then, allows brain to find itself in a new place by which it can make a new choice that acts more quickly, is more responsive, and activates a little bit more of brain or day or life than before. That is why mindfulness and depression are connected. Again, I remind you, it is not a cure, it is a way, it is a path, it is a regenerative, restorative path by which brain can reignite. When brain reignites, literally, synapses within the brain begin to fire more quickly. When they fire more quickly, they discharge more energy. When they discharge more energy, other needed chemicals are made in the process. Literally, they burn forth, they burst forth by energy that is then discharged. And when the new energy bursts forth, then it duplicates, replicates itself, and then is able to move into either the area of the brain in which it was necessary or in shorter supply, or into other areas of the brain that did not receive it. Imagine simply what it is to receive a higher content of oxygen. Even this small amount of change would truly and quickly and broadly restructure your day. Mindfulness, then, is the ability to re-sequence, to reignite the brain. Mindfulness, in all of the examples that was given earlier, can be called upon. It does not require a great amount of effort, but it will be a little bit of struggle while the older part of brain says, I can't do that, or I already tried that, or, oh yes, I thought about that some time ago, it had a small effect, but then it went back to how it already was. There is a place within that you must travel to, as it would be, and then travel beyond, and it will require some effort on your part. And yes, well it would be to swallow a tiny pill in order to get there, and certainly you may have these as accomplishments or accompaniments, but it will not take you to where you wish to go. For to all those that consider themselves accomplished and accompanied by the pharmaceuticals that offer to them support, well it is known that you do not wish to continue with these lifelong, and some part of you knows that you can do this on your own if you only knew this or that, or how, or when. To re-sequence the mind, then, is not a simple matter, but it is not difficult either. It requires a little bit of stretching, to stretch the mind and its ability to consider what it is, to go beyond as much as possible the limitations so that you will feel liberated. One of the ways to do this is to understand what is rote and rotation. Rote is to do something again and again, a little bit like one of your routines. By rote, every day at 2 o'clock I sit down to sew. Every day at 3 o'clock I read a book. Every day at 9 o'clock I go to work, or what it would be. By rote becomes your routine, and the brain becomes very accustomed to this routine, and so it continues to do these things unconsciously in some way, or by rote. It is not something new. There is nothing new to learn in the process, so it need not be completely present in the process. Part of the difficulty with those that consider themselves depressed is that they are not completely present in any one moment. Some part of them is absent elsewhere, or to their thinking, non-creative, non-existence, non-caring to some degree. Of course, every individual, depressed or not, could say that about themselves, and it would also be true. But for the depressed individual, it seems that much more difficult to truly be present in the moment, always recalling a moment or a reason why they need to be present. For there is nothing new, and everything being about the same, they are simply not needed. There is no real, important or driving reason. And so by rote and routine, life again continues to reinforce that one does not have access to all possibilities or anything that is impossibly willing to be dreamed, wished, or invented just for the sake of doing so. If we to rote add rotation, which would mean to change that or to make active what is the rote or the routine, then the mind is able to sequence or to re-sequence brain and its activities, because then there is something new or different that must be considered. So here I give to you a very simple formula, no true solution, but it is a simple and well-tread formula that adds rote and rotation, that has a very strong, very prominent effect upon the brain, and that is to change the rote. In a small way, in the beginning, in larger ways afterwards, by adding and changing and removing to the routine. So for instance, if every day the waking time is 7, to rotate or to change the rote, the routine, would be now to awaken at 6, or then the next day to awaken at 8. If possible, it would be to change it every day or every other day. In the beginning, if this is too difficult, it can be every week or every other week. Ultimately, better it would be to change it every day. Up at 6, tomorrow up at 7, the next day up at 8, then back to 6, and perhaps on the 4th or 5th or 6th day up at 4 or 5, or what it will be. Truly up. Not simply just to up for a moment, to awaken for a moment and to say, well, I did it, there it is, and now back to sleep and back to the rote. It must be to fully awaken and engage the mindfulness of that day, so that the mind can then teach the brain new thoughts, new waves. By new waves of energy, it can convey new thoughts, new reasons to be, based on the polarity, to repolarize the brain. And it requires then, yes, the effort of body, mind, and spirit to access this mindfulness, to make it so, to make it real as it would be. The same would apply to almost everything. If you will typically wear trousers on a certain day, then something else. Dungarees, jeans as you will call them, something else then. Or perhaps to eliminate one color and then to add two others for a day or a week. Or a certain activity, to add or subtract or change an activity as well as the timing by which it is offered. By rote and rotation, I tell you that more and much can be accomplished. Also to insist upon yourself, depressed or not, you may say, to add something new to the learning process, something preferably to do with the arts or the leisure or the sciences. Therefore, if you know not how to dance, then I would suggest you learn to dance. If you know not how to paint or to draw, then I would suggest the learning of this. And yes, it will not look like much, or perhaps you will find some activity that you are very good at that you did not know. It is, in fact, the very lesson is about the rote and the rotation, and to stimulate new and different parts of the brain that have been ignored, and to allow the mind full charge of this, to allow the mind to be the boss, as it were, and to say to the brain, here and now, obey and do, for it is all of our good to regenerate all of this. Again, to add color, sound, music, thought, idea, color, vision, day, clarity, any rote and rotation to what you do. Perhaps even I would say to you to eat your dinner in the morning and your breakfast, to break fast at night. Even this, you see, to change all that you have adhered to or believed it was the best or the only that you could do. Yes, it is a very simple thing, you would say to Gaia. Now do so, and you will see in fact how difficult it is to do all of this and more. But you will see its benefits readily, I will tell you. You will see the benefit of this. We'll also say to you that the moon becomes very, very important in this process as well. And so if you were to reintegrate or regenerate the mind and the brain, you will need the activity, you will need access and guidance from the moon itself, not simply from the earth. The earth will provide some. The earth will provide the task. The moon will give you the benefit. It will give to you its beauty. It will give to you its energy. It will lend to you in the sleeping state as well as the waking state the potency that the earth does not have, cannot give to you in this regard. Because to some degree you believe, consciously or unconsciously, that it is your life upon the earth, that there is something wrong with, that you have been cast to the earth, that its density, that its gravity, or that it in some way is responsible for your unhappy state or condition of affairs. Therefore, to draw upon the moon, its beauty, its softer light, and the ability to move and shift the tides from within, the ability of the moon to work within the unconscious structure of your being, to realign even without your knowing. So the moon is to become your mistress, as it would be. You would call upon the moon again and again and again to guide you, to awaken you. You would call upon the tides and the oceans and all that the moon governs. You would call upon the sleep state, the dream state, and the ability to awaken the visions of the possible and the impossible. The moon becomes your mistress, your guide, your teacher, and in all ways it becomes the symbol of that which purifies and lifts the veils of the density that have occupied your life. Again, the moon is another key to mindfulness and to regenerate the sequential effects. Look to the moon. It has its sequences, its facets, its faces, each one showing to you something, revealing something, and at the same time hiding something else, keeping something else in repose, in the background, in that way. Of mindfulness it will also be said then to reconsider subject-object orientation. For to that which is a depressed mind, all things are subjective, and all things seem subjectively impossible. Others might be able to do that, but I cannot. Tomorrow I may be able to do that, but today I am incapable. So it is a subjective and mindless judgment upon oneself. So to change that, to rotate that, so that all things become objective rather than subjective to the best of your abilities. All things are objects. That is a lamp, that is a table, tomorrow is the next day. You see, very, very objective. It is the simplest way to describe something. This is my life. Not this is my good life, my depressed life, my life which one day will be better. This is my life. Today was just a day. That is a lamp, the other is a table. This is sleep, this is wake, this is activity, this is a simple choice. Everything becomes very, very simply objective. It would be as if I were to take away your ability to describe it as anything more than what the moment itself would offer. You see? Because a depressed mind will often describe something in its most subjective or least beautiful way, particularly the individual itself. I am this, tomorrow I will be that. Now I am reading, tomorrow I will be studying. I am learning how to play drums. I am knitting a sweater. I am now working, I am now driving. What it will be, it is a very objective thing to do, and you will see that soon the object will begin to refill itself in a different way. Being objective, you will find that you are less judgmental, less scarce, and in a way, because objects are meant to be fulfilling, they will begin to describe themselves a little bit differently in a time. To continue with the subject then, we must also then think of healing and what things or thoughts are healing to a depressed individual or a mind or brain that thinks that it is depressed. Simply put, then, are those things that you may have already considered, perhaps that you have already given them validity or given them a try. Nonetheless, they will be enunciated, enumerated here for you in hopes that you will make the attempt again. In order to heal your brain, your mind, it requires more, a substantial amount more oxygenation than the normal, or what you think of as the normal brain or brain activity. It is the oxygenation of certain thoughts and ideas that transfers the chemicals within the brain at a faster rate. The faster these chemicals are transferred, the more brain activity there is, and the more quickly advanced you will think of yourself, the more quickly the next thought will come. The slower the thought, the more dense you will say, I cannot do that. The faster the thought, the more advanced, the quicker the firing mechanism that bursts energy in the brain, the more that you will be able to say, I can, or I will try, or I will do my best, or I have done it at least to some degree where before I was not able to do so at all. Look for those places within you in which there is more oxygenation available to you. A meditative, contemplative stance will draw more oxygen into the brain, as will certain breathing techniques, which is on your own. You may research, particularly those breathing techniques of the Sufis, of the whirling dervishes of long ago. You may find certain techniques of interest there. I will not go into the details here, for it will be a project for you to well and discover of your own. The breathing techniques of those who have found ultimate peace, as well as the breathing techniques of those that would consider themselves the ultimate of all athletes, and how they will go about moving oxygen up and into the brain case and cavity, and from there down into all of the glandular activities of the body, and pushing it through all of the meridians and gates within the system of the body as well, until they reach, in fact, every extremity, every possible point within your being, every cell, every molecule, every fingertip and toe, even to the point that it will feel as if you are slightly levitated off the ground, because there is so much oxygen, light, living energy within you that you are literally lifted off your seat and moved or taken for a walk. This cannot be stressed enough, that you are to oxygenate yourself, that you are to breathe, not only breathe deeply or slowly, but in certain patterns. Remember, again, by rote and by rotation, you will change even how you breathe or how you breathe at specific times of the day. To enunciate further would be as well that the movement and the stretching of the body as well. For to stretch the body in certain ways would be to move the oxygen further than it would go. If typically your motion is to sit either motionless in your couch potatoes in your seat, then you will see that the oxygenation will not reach all of the extremities and in its own way will stick itself in certain areas. Therefore it is to push and to breathe with the certain techniques as well, moving and stretching this energy until it fits into every possible corner of your being, be it a corner of the brain or the mind or the body. By moving and shifting your weight, your balance, you may find that it is very difficult for you to move and stretch. Even you may achieve more by standing first on one foot and then on the other. You will see where there is balance and where there is imbalance. Stand first on one foot, then on another. Then stand on one foot, but close the eyes. Then do the same with the other. Then add the moving of the hands or the arms in outstretched ways. See where there is balance and imbalance. Move and stretch, close the eyes, tip the head forward or backward as well, and see how quickly or easily you move into balance or out of balance. Remember that earlier we have said that it is the polarity of the being and the body, that there is a misalignment of polarity. Well, it is one thing, as many do, to go and see this healer or that healer and say fix it or stretch it or move it back into place. It is another thing to do so on your own, simply by standing, shifting, moving, lifting, twisting. You will see all that is right and all that can be maneuvered back into place without very much effort. Can also be stressed then that upon the nutrition of the body and what is ingested into the body. Much has been said whether to add the sugars to the body or to subtract these or not. We'll say to you there is less concern for what is the sugar effect of the body. However, we'll say then you may wish to remain with the most natural of all substances, because you see what you are wishing to create in your body, in your brain, is the natural and enhanced chemical structure of the brain. Therefore, the more natural desire, activity, and instruction you give to the body, the more it will be able to replicate, recreate what you are asking based upon what you are suggesting, based upon the objective, the subject, object, the objective thought. Here is something natural. Please use this natural substance to create that much more of another natural substance that I am in high seeking or regard of now. Therefore, take to yourself, if you like, the sugars in terms of the sugared fruits, those that are naturally occurring, and if possible, you will leave aside those that are artificial in nature, at least for the time being, until they can be well identified by the brain, and the brain knows how to discard these easily within the body. Along with the higher form of nutrition, we'll also say to identify with the light, with all forms of the light, with the full spectrum of light and with the full colors of light. Matters not what the weather is out of doors, you must here and there take yourself out of doors in order to move into the polarity exercises, if you like, the movement, the stretching, the oxygenation out of doors, the balance exercise out of doors, your nutrition, if it can be accomplished out of doors rather than indoors, so much the better, under the full spectrum of the sky or the light as it might be determined. If possible, place yourself in a field of green, be it a forest or a city park, matters not. If at all possible, place yourself in or near a body of water, where you will hear it and feel it reflected both within and without. all of the elements can be taken into account. The flame of a candle is of high regard and benefit to mindfulness. All aspects of every element, be it earth and sky, be it fire and water, all of the elements will come together for brain and mind understand these, and that they are to bring balance to the human being that is composed of all of these elements as well. To bring about then the right use of vision. It is difficult for one that considers oneself depressed to see visions of a different future. However, it would be to highly engage the visioning process of that which might be impossible. Imagine a world that has only a red sky. Imagine a world with only a violet sky, perfect in every way, but with a violet sky. Imagine a world beautiful in its oceans, but the oceans have a complete different look about what they do, or what the waves do, or what lives in the ocean. It is to conceive of the impossible, to dream, to vision something that is impossible, not because it must be brought into form, but because it is the human being's rightful ability to be creative in every way and to make for itself the kind of life it wishes to live in the kind of world it wishes to live, and that is part of its relationship with the earth as well. So it's to relearn how to vision. Do not simply dream of an impossible life that you do not feel capable of creating. Simply begin with those things that are impossible but worth visioning. Imagine, if you like, a world that has no war in it. Matters not if it is not possible today. Matters only that you have dreamed it into being, and you have given it more possibility, for you hold it in high esteem and regard. You give it permission to be so, if not today, then upon another day. Would be rightful then to take into account then the questions that would be put forward regarding the pharmaceutical solutions that are offered in today's day. So be it, sweet ones, and what is to be said of this? Your world, highly dependent upon pharmacopoeia, has created a variety, then, of pharmaceuticals that have a high degree of impact upon the brain. Some of these have been found to be of high incident or use to the brain in fighting depression, as it is called. And literally, these have come to be found in almost accidental ways, as these drugs were developed then for other purposes. But so be it. If it is that they bring you comfort, then you may continue them to the degree that they will. Understand that they are made of an artificial substance, that they trick the brain into doing this or that. They trick the brain into thinking that it must create more of this, less or that, or transfer to this degree or at that time. In consuming this, you are saying to the brain that you do not completely trust it to do this on its own, and so be it. If that be true, then that is the truth. Then that which you are offering it to then is a supplement or a companion. But do not take for granted, do not forget that a brain and mind can be retrained, that it can relearn how to be not like others, not normal like others are, but unique and perfect in its own way, slower or faster or more creative. You will note that there will be days in which you are highly attuned, and other days in which you will exist in a kind of fog or mist, and so be it. All other individuals do the same. It is simply that you note it that much better. So use the pharmaceuticals to the degree that you do, sparingly if possible, temporarily if possible. Acknowledge that their effects then are also temporary, and that in fact it is your own desire and your own mindfulness to be or to become purposeful and creative that will cause you to engage in different ways. So be it. The subject then has been explored, only lightly, broadly, with a broad brush, not specifically. But allow yourself to see it then, depression, a name that humanity has given to the inability of the poles to express themselves in the highest and best or most creative ways. It is that which humanity draws to itself one of the conditions by which it wishes to escape. Now, take into consideration the moon for a moment. It is captive to the earth at this time. And yet it is the moon that controls both the tides and many other effects upon the earth. But yes, it is captive to the earth and to the earth's pull. You too, then, are captive to the earth for a time, captive to your body and to your thoughts for a time. But oh, how much influence you have over your own life and over the earth. Oh, how much complement and beauty that you add. What would the earth be without the moon? What would the earth be without the moon's light, without its shadow, without all that it offers? And the same is true. What would the earth be without you? Without your beauty, without your uniqueness, without your structure? For you are one and perfect, as beautiful and whole and necessary as the moon. And that is how I hold you. Until the next moment, then, I bid you good day.